There's something about standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon that changes you. The way the earth just opens. A wound carved through 277 miles of Arizona desert, stretching a mile deep into layers of time most people will never touch. But here's what they don't tell you in the brochures. The Grand Canyon doesn't just show you the past, it hides it. Beneath those red walls and ancient stone, there are stories that refuse to stay buried. Disappearances with no explanation. Geological gaps where entire eras of Earth's history have simply vanished. Caves sealed by forces no one can explain. And sounds, rhythmic, deliberate, rising from miles below the surface, like the Earth itself is trying to speak. Before we descend, what single secret would you most want the canyon to reveal? A human story, a cave, or a geological mystery? Drop that in the comments now. And if you like mysteries told with science and suspense, quietly tap subscribe so you don't miss the next descent. For over a century, scientists, explorers, and wanderers have descended into this canyon searching for answers. Some found them, some never came back. And some discovered that certain mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be witnessed. Lock in, put on your headphones, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see one of the world's most famous landmarks. This isn't just geology, this is history written in stone, blood, and silence. 6 mysteries, 6 layers of truth, and one canyon that refuses to give up its secrets. Let's descend. The disappearance of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. The honeymoon that ended in silence, November 1928. The Colorado River cuts through the Grand Canyon like a vein through stone, cold and relentless. 2 newlyweds, Glenn and Bessie Hyde, decided this would be their honeymoon. Not Paris, not some quiet cabin in the woods. They wanted adventure. Glenn was 29, an experienced river runner with confidence that bordered on recklessness. Bessie was 22, a poet from West Virginia who'd never been on a river like this. But she trusted him, and together they built a wooden scow, a flat-bottomed boat with no motor, just oars and hope, and pushed off into the canyon with a plan to make history. Their goal? To navigate the entire length of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. If they succeeded, Bessie would become the first woman ever to accomplish the feat. It was ambitious, it was dangerous, and for a while, it was working. They made it past the Bright Angel Trail, past Hermit Rapids, past sections of the river that had claimed lives before theirs. Other river runners saw them along the way, waving, smiling, moving downstream with the kind of ease that comes from either skill or ignorance. No one could tell which. On November 18th, they stopped at Phantom Ranch and met with Emery Kolb, a photographer and river guide who lived at the canyon's edge. Kolb took their photograph. 2 young faces, tired but hopeful, standing beside their scow. It would be the last confirmed image of them alive. They pushed off again. The river swallowed them whole. In mid to late December 1928, a search plane spotted the Hydes scow near River Mile 237. The boat was undamaged. Their supplies were still on board. Food, clothing, Bessie's journal recovered from the scow contained entries into late November. Final dated entries are from the end of November 1928, which indicate they were still traveling days after their last confirmed sighting. But Glenn and Bessie, gone. Search parties scoured the canyon for weeks. They combed the riverbanks, checked every eddy, every sandbar, every place where bodies might wash ashore. They found nothing, no bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of a wreck. It was as if the river had simply erased them. The theories came quickly, each one more haunting than the last. Some said they drowned, caught in a rapid they couldn't see coming. The Colorado River is merciless, especially in winter when the water runs fast and cold. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and the current takes you. Without life jackets, they wouldn't have lasted long. Others believed Glenn, known for his stubbornness and temper, had made a fatal mistake, and Bessie paid the price. Maybe he pushed too hard. Maybe he ignored her warnings. Maybe the river punished them both for his arrogance. Then there were darker whispers, murder. Some speculated Glenn had grown violent during the long, isolated journey, that Bessie, trapped on a boat with a man she barely knew, had fought back, that one or both had been thrown overboard in a moment of rage or desperation. And then there were the sightings. In 1971, more than 4 decades after the disappearance, a woman named Elizabeth Cutler was rafting the Grand Canyon when an elderly woman approached her at a campsite. The woman stared at her for a long time, her eyes strange and distant, then said, "I'm Bessie Hyde." She claimed she'd killed Glenn in self-defense, hiked out of the canyon alone, and started a new life under a different name. Before anyone could question her further, she disappeared into the canyon shadows, leaving Cutler stunned and confused. Investigators looked into it. Elizabeth Cutler was real. Her account was documented. But the elderly woman, impossible to verify. She was never seen again, and no records could confirm her identity. In another account, a skeleton discovered in the canyon in the 1970s was rumored to match Glenn's description. But official records were vague, and the remains were never definitively identified. The bones were catalogued, stored, and eventually forgotten. Over the years, other hikers claimed to see Bessie's ghost wandering the riverbanks at dusk, her figure pale and soaked, forever searching for the way out. Park rangers dismissed the stories as campfire tales, but the sightings persisted. The National Park Service still lists Glenn and Bessie Hyde as missing. Their case remains one of the most famous unsolved disappearances in American history. The canyon holds its story somewhere in its depths, but it refuses to tell. Because the Grand Canyon doesn't just take people, it keeps them. Their boat is still on display at the South Rim, a silent monument to a journey that never ended. Visitors walk past it every day, snapping photos, reading the plaque. But most don't stop to think about what it means. That boat held 2 lives, 2 dreams, 2 people who vanished 30 miles from safety, leaving behind only questions and silence. And sometimes, the only thing more haunting than finding answers is realizing there might never be any at all. The river still flows, the canyon still stands, and somewhere in the cold water and red stone, Glenn and Bessie remain, lost, forgotten, and forever part of the canyon's silent history. The mystery of the copper mines and forbidden caves, where legend meets restriction. Every great canyon has its ghost stories, but the Grand Canyon has something stranger, stories that might be true. For over a century, rumors have circulated about ancient mining operations hidden deep within the canyon's walls, copper mines carved by hands unknown, caves sealed shut with no explanation, tunnels that stretch for miles beneath the surface, leading to chambers that shouldn't exist. And here's the thing, some of it is real. Ancient mining sites do exist within and around the Grand Canyon. Archaeological evidence confirms that indigenous peoples extracted minerals from the region for centuries, long before European contact. Copper tools, turquoise fragments, and ochre pigments have all been recovered from sites scattered across the canyon's expanse. These weren't industrial operations. They were small-scale, sacred, purposeful. The ancestral Puebloans, the Kohonaina, the Hopi, all of them used the canyon's resources. They knew where the copper veins ran, where the turquoise hid, where the red ochre could be scraped from the walls. They carved small tunnels, sometimes no bigger than a person could crawl through, and extracted what they needed for tools, jewelry, and ceremony. But then there are the other stories, the ones that don't fit so neatly into textbooks. In the early 1900s, explorers began reporting strange openings high in the canyon walls, perfectly square, carved with precision, positioned hundreds of feet above the river where no natural cave should be. Some claim to have seen symbols etched into the stone near these entrances, markings that resembled neither Native American petroglyphs nor any known script. Photographs were taken, notes were filed, and then, slowly, systematically, the sites began to disappear from public record. By the mid-20th century, certain areas of the canyon were declared off-limits, not to tourists, to everyone. The official explanation? Safety and preservation. Some caves were deemed structurally unstable. Others were said to contain hazardous materials. High-grade uranium deposits, breccia pipes, were mined in the mid-20th century in the Grand Canyon region. Abandoned mines and legacy issues have raised water and cultural resource concerns, which is why some areas have restricted access and why a 2012 withdrawal paused new claims on much federal land. That part, at least, is true. Uranium mines did operate in and around the Grand Canyon during the 1940s and 1950s. The US government, hungry for radioactive material to fuel its atomic ambitions, sent miners into the depths to extract ore. It was dangerous work. Many of those miners developed cancer years later, their lungs scarred by radon gas and radioactive dust. By the 1960s, most of the mines were abandoned, their entrances collapsed or sealed to prevent accidental exposure. The government didn't advertise this history. It didn't need to. The canyons swallowed the evidence and the public moved on. But not all restricted zones have uranium. Not all of them are structurally unsound. Some are closed because of their cultural significance to the Hopi, Havasupai, Navajo, and other native tribes who consider certain caves sacred, portals to the underworld, resting places of ancestors, sites where the boundaries between worlds grow thin. The Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service maintain strict control over these areas, and for good reason. Preservation of sacred sites is critical, so is public safety. Disturbing these places can cause irreparable damage, both to the land and to the cultures that hold them sacred. But here's where the story gets murky. Why do some of these restricted zones appear on no maps? Why do hikers who venture too close report compasses spinning, drones losing signal, and an eerie silence that presses against the chest like a physical weight? Skeptics say it's all exaggeration, misidentified natural formations, embellished campfire tales, and a healthy dose of human paranoia. And they're probably right about most of it. The human mind loves a mystery. We see patterns where there are none. We create stories to fill the gaps in our understanding. But the restrictions remain. The fences stay up. And every few years, someone finds an opening they weren't supposed to find. A crack in the wall. A tunnel entrance half buried in rubble. And before they can document it, the site is sealed, the coordinates scrubbed, and the story dismissed as fantasy. There's no evidence of vast hidden networks or lost civilizations beneath the canyon. The US Geological Survey and tribal historians alike confirm that. But there are caves, there are tunnels, and some of them, for reasons both scientific and sacred, are meant to stay closed. Because the Grand Canyon isn't just a natural wonder, it's a living archive, one that holds secrets in stone, silence, and restriction. Which intrigues you more, the history that's protected or the rumors that persist? Tell us which side you believe in the comments. If you want more deep dive episodes like this, hit subscribe quietly. We'll keep bringing the evidence and the mystery. The forbidden label often refers to safety and preservation laws, not secrecy. Radiation hazards are real. Structural collapse is real. Sacred sites deserve protection. But when you layer those legitimate concerns over a century of whispered stories, blurred maps, and sealed entrances, the line between fact and legend starts to blur. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the mystery isn't about what's hidden, it's about why we're so desperate to uncover it. Because sometimes the most forbidden places are forbidden for a reason. Not because they're dangerous, but because they force us to confront the limits of our understanding. The copper mines exist. The caves exist, the restrictions exist. What's inside them? That's where fact ends and speculation begins. And in the Grand Canyon, speculation has a way of becoming legend, and legend has a way of refusing to die. The Anasazi disappearance, when a civilization walked away. Around 1200 AD, something happened in the American Southwest. Something that still doesn't make sense. The ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, though many tribes reject that name as a Navajo word meaning ancient enemies, had thrived in the region for over 1,000 years. They built intricate cliff dwellings carved directly into canyon walls. They engineered sophisticated irrigation systems to farm the desert. They created pottery, textiles, and tools that spoke of a culture deeply connected to the land. And then, over the course of just a few generations, they left. Not some of them, all of them. Evidence, tree ring drought records, resource depletion, social stress, and migration patterns points to a complex set of causes for the late 13th century departures from Mesa Verde and surrounding areas rather than a single simple explanation. By 1300 AD, the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and the areas surrounding the Grand Canyon stood empty. Homes abandoned mid-construction, tools left behind, granaries still holding remnants of corn and beans. It was as if an entire civilization simply stood up one day and walked away. No mass graves, no signs of invasion, no evidence of catastrophic disease, just absence. Archaeologists have been trying to solve this mystery for over a century, and the truth is, they still don't fully understand what happened. But they have theories, each supported by evidence, each incomplete on its own. The most widely accepted explanation is drought. Tree ring data, dendrochronology, from the period shows that the Southwest experienced a series of prolonged, devastating droughts between 1130 and 1300 AD. Rivers dried up, springs stopped flowing, crops failed year after year. The land that had sustained the ancestral Puebloans for generations simply couldn't support them anymore. Imagine living in a place where rain is already scarce, where every drop of water is precious, where your survival depends on timing your planting perfectly with the seasons. Now imagine that the rain stops coming. Not for a year, not for two, for decades. The corn withers, the beans shrivel, the squash dies on the vine. You dig deeper wells, but they go dry. You move closer to rivers, but they become trickles, then mud, then dust. Your children grow thin, your elders grow weak, and every year the sky remains cloudless. That's what the ancestral Puebloans faced, and eventually they had no choice but to move. But drought alone doesn't explain everything. Why didn't they return when the rains came back? Why did they leave behind so much? Tools, pottery, even some of their sacred kivas, the circular ceremonial chambers that were the heart of their communities. And why do oral traditions from the Hopi, Zuni, and other descendant tribes speak not of fleeing in desperation, but of migrating with purpose? According to Hopi tradition, the departure wasn't a collapse, it was a pilgrimage. The ancestral Puebloans believed they were living in the third world, and when that world became corrupt or unbalanced, when people forgot how to live in harmony with the land, they were called to move on, to find the fourth world, the one we inhabit now. The migration wasn't about survival. It was about spiritual fulfillment. It was about answering a call from the divine, about seeking a new beginning in a place where balance could be restored. This isn't just mythology, it's living history. The Hopi still perform ceremonies that commemorate this journey. They still tell stories of the clans that traveled from the north, from the great stone cities, carrying their traditions and their gods to new lands. Other researchers point to resource depletion. Centuries of farming, hunting, and logging had stripped the land. The ancestral Puebloans needed timber for roof beams, fuel for fires, and tools for building. They cut down forests faster than they could regrow. Deforestation led to soil erosion. Without trees to hold the earth in place, rain, when it did come, washed away the topsoil, making farming even harder. Game animals became scarce. Deer, rabbits, wild turkeys, all hunted to near extinction in the immediate area. The people had to travel farther and farther to find food, expending more energy than the hunt was worth. The environment could no longer sustain large populations, so people scattered, seeking new territories where the balance hadn't yet been broken. Then there's the theory of violence. Some archaeological sites show evidence of conflict, burned structures, broken pottery, and even skeletal remains with signs of trauma. Blunt force wounds to the skull, cut marks on bones, signs of dismemberment. Perhaps warfare between rival groups forced people to flee. Competition for dwindling resources can turn neighbors into enemies. Maybe different clans fought over water rights, over the last productive farmland, over control of trade routes, or maybe internal social collapse led to fragmentation and exodus. When a society is under extreme stress, when the crops fail, when the children starve, when the priests can't make the rain come, people look for someone to blame. Leaders are questioned, rituals are doubted, the social fabric tears. Some researchers have even found evidence of cannibalism at a few sites, though this remains deeply controversial and contested. If true, it would suggest a level of desperation and social breakdown almost unimaginable. But here's what we know for certain. The ancestral Puebloans didn't vanish. They transformed. Their descendants still live in the Southwest today, the Hopi, Zuni, Acoma, Laguna, and the many Rio Grande Puebloan communities. They carry the stories, the traditions, and the memory of those who came before. To them, there is no mystery. Their ancestors made a choice. They honored a prophecy. They moved on. But for those of us looking back through the lens of archaeology, the cliff dwellings remain haunting. Standing inside one of those empty rooms, staring out at the canyon below, you can almost feel the weight of the question they left behind. Why leave a home carved into stone? Why abandon a place that took generations to build? Maybe the answer isn't written in the ruins. Maybe it's written in the land itself, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, not even civilizations built into the bones of the earth. The ancestral Puebloans knew when to let go. They understood that clinging to a dying land would only lead to their own death. So they walked away. They carried their memories south and east. They built new homes, new kivas, new lives. And the cliff dwellings? They stand as monuments, not to failure but to resilience, not to mystery but to choice. Because the Grand Canyon doesn't just hold the past, it holds the memory of those who knew when to let go. And sometimes, the greatest mystery isn't why they left. It's how they found the courage to walk away from everything they'd ever known. The Great Unconformity. The billion years. The Earth forgot. Look at the walls of the Grand Canyon, and you're looking at time itself. Layer after layer of sediment stacked like pages in a book, each one recording a chapter of Earth's history. Limestone, sandstone, shale, mudstone. All of it pressing down, holding the memory of oceans, deserts, rivers, and life that once crawled, swam, or grew in this place. But there's a moment in that book where the pages have been ripped out. It's called the Great Unconformity, and it's one of the most dramatic geological mysteries on the planet. You can see it with your own eyes if you know where to look. A sharp, almost violent boundary where ancient Precambrian rock, some of it nearly 1.7 billion years old, sits directly against much younger Cambrian layers formed around 500 million years ago. That's a gap of over 1.2 billion years, gone, not buried, not hidden, erased. Geologists call it an unconformity, a break in the rock record where time is missing. But this isn't a small gap. This is an abyss. More than a billion years of Earth's history, continental shifts, volcanic eruptions, entire mountain ranges rising and falling, simply doesn't exist in the rock. Think about that for a moment. 1.2 billion years. That's more than a quarter of Earth's entire existence. That's the span of time during which life evolved from simple single-celled organisms into complex multicellular forms. That's when the atmosphere changed, when continents drifted apart and collided, when entire oceans opened and closed. All of it gone, wiped from the record. So what happened? The leading theory is erosion. Massive, incomprehensible erosion. Scientists believe that during the late Precambrian, much of the North American continent was lifted by tectonic forces, exposing ancient rock to the surface. Over hundreds of millions of years, wind, water, and ice wore that rock down, grinding away layers until only the oldest, deepest stone remained. Imagine mountains as tall as the Himalayas, standing where the Grand Canyon is now. Imagine millions of years of rain and wind tearing at those peaks, washing the debris into ancient seas, carving away stone at a pace too slow for any human mind to grasp. Layer after layer, mile after mile, ground into sand and carried away. Then, around 500 million years ago, the seas returned. Sediment began to settle again, burying the eroded surface and starting a new chapter in the geological record. That boundary, the place where the old rock meets the new, is the Great Unconformity. But erosion doesn't explain everything. Some researchers have proposed that global glaciation events, known as snowball Earth episodes, played a role. During these periods, the entire planet may have been covered in ice, with glaciers grinding across continents, scouring away rock and leaving smooth, barren surfaces behind. Snowball Earth isn't science fiction. Evidence suggests that between 720 and 635 million years ago, Earth experienced at least two major glaciation events, so severe that ice may have covered the planet from pole to equator. Temperatures plummeted, oceans froze. Life clung to survival in a few scattered refugees. When the ice finally melted, triggered by volcanic greenhouse gases building up in the atmosphere, the seas flooded in, depositing fresh sediment on top of the ancient scoured stone. Others point to tectonic uplift. As continents collided and split apart, enormous sections of crust were thrust upward, exposing deep layers of rock to erosion. The sheer scale of these movements could have stripped away vast amounts of material in geologically short timescales. The Colorado Plateau itself, the region that contains the Grand Canyon, has been uplifted multiple times over the past billion years. Each time, the land rose higher, exposing older rock to the elements. Each time, erosion claimed its due. But here's the unsettling part. No one knows for sure. Despite decades of research, advanced radiometric dating techniques, and countless field studies, the exact mechanism behind the great unconformity remains uncertain. What we do know is this: the missing rock once existed. It held the record of nearly half of Earth's entire history, and now it's gone, leaving only a scar. Standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, staring at that boundary between ancient and less ancient, you're looking at the ghost of deep time, a wound in the planet's memory, a place where the Earth forgot itself. And maybe that's the real mystery. Not how it happened, but what was lost, because somewhere in that missing billion years, the Earth was transforming. Supercontinents were forming and breaking apart. The atmosphere was changing from toxic to breathable. Life was evolving from single cells into the complex organisms that would eventually crawl onto land. And we'll never know the full story. We'll never see the mountains that once stood here. We'll never know what creatures lived and died on those ancient shores. We'll never read the chapters that were torn from Earth's book. The great unconformity exists all over the world, in Scotland, in India, in Australia. But nowhere is it as visible, as dramatic, as accessible as it is in the Grand Canyon. You can stand at the river's edge and touch both sides of the gap with your hands. Ancient on one side, less ancient on the other hand, and between them, a billion years of silence. Geologists debate the details, but they all agree on one thing: the great unconformity is a humbling reminder of the forces that shape our planet. Forces so vast, so slow, so patient, that they can erase entire eras from existence. The Grand Canyon isn't just a window into the past, it's a window into erasure, into forgetting, into the terrible power of time. And sometimes, the most powerful mysteries aren't the ones we solve. They're the ones that remind us how much we'll never know. The Earth has amnesia, and so do we. The Meteor landslide hypothesis, when the sky scarred the stone. The Grand Canyon is the result of slow, patient forces. 6 million years of the Colorado River carving through rock. Wind and ice chipping away at the edges. Tectonic shifts are lifting the plateau, giving the river something to cut into. It's a story of erosion, persistence, and deep time. Or at least, that's what we've always believed. But there's another theory. One that's far more dramatic. One that suggests the canyon's dramatic topography wasn't shaped entirely by patience, but by violence from above. Some geologists propose that a massive meteor impact near the Grand Canyon region may have triggered ancient landslides, fault shifts, and erosional patterns still visible today. The idea is controversial, debated, and largely unproven, but it refuses to go away. Here's why. Scattered across the Colorado Plateau are circular depressions, disrupted rock layers, and geological features that look suspiciously like impact signatures. The kind of scarring you'd expect from a massive object slamming into the Earth at thousands of miles per hour. The most compelling evidence comes from the region surrounding Meteor crater, about 60 miles east of Flagstaff, Arizona. That crater, nearly a mile wide and 550 feet deep, was formed roughly 50,000 years ago when a nickel-iron meteorite struck the Earth with the force of a 10-megaton nuclear bomb. It's one of the best-preserved impact sites on the planet. Standing at the rim of Meteor crater, You can see the violence written in stone. The walls are steep, almost vertical. The floor is flat, filled with debris. The surrounding landscape is littered with fragments of iron and shocked quartz, minerals that only form under the extreme pressures of impact. But Meteor crater is relatively young. The Grand Canyon is ancient, so if a meteor played a role in the canyon's formation, it would have struck much earlier, millions of years ago, long before the Colorado River began its work. Proponents of the hypothesis point to certain geological anomalies, circular patterns in the rock, displaced strata that don't align with typical erosion models, evidence of sudden, catastrophic shifts that seem inconsistent with gradual river carving. They argue that a large impact could have fractured the plateau, creating fault lines that guided the river's path. It could have triggered massive landslides, collapsing sections of rock, and accelerating the canyon's formation. In this version of events, the meteor didn't create the canyon, but it set the stage, weakening the crust and making it easier for water and time to do the rest. Think of it like this. Imagine dropping a rock onto a sheet of ice. The rock doesn't create a hole immediately, but it creates cracks, fractures that spread outward, weakening the ice. Over time, water seeps into those cracks, freezing and expanding, widening the fractures until the ice finally splits apart. That's the meteor landslide hypothesis in a nutshell. The impact creates the weakness. Time does the rest. But here's the problem. There's no accepted meteor impact origin for the Grand Canyon itself, but a 2025 study proposes the Barringer Meteor crater impact, approximately 50 to 60,000 years ago, may have triggered a large landslide in the canyon area. That new hypothesis links two events, but does not overturn mainstream explanations for the canyon's overall formation. Many geologists argue that the features cited as evidence could just as easily be explained by tectonic uplift, volcanic activity, or normal erosional processes. Circular depressions could be collapsed lava domes, disrupted strata, could be fault movement. Sudden shifts could be landslides triggered by earthquakes, not impacts. The hypothesis remains speculative, intriguing, but unproven. Still, the idea lingers. Because the Grand Canyon doesn't entirely behave like other river-carved valleys. Its walls are steeper, its depth is more extreme. Its formation timeline, while long, still contains gaps and inconsistencies that make scientists uncomfortable. Most river valleys form in a V-shape, steep sides that gradually widen as you move away from the water. But the Grand Canyon is different. In many places, the walls are nearly vertical, forming a deep, narrow slot. That's unusual for a river-carved valley. Some sections of the canyon also show evidence of massive rockfalls and landslides, events so catastrophic they would have temporarily dammed the Colorado River, creating enormous lakes that later burst through, carving the canyon even deeper. Could a meteor impact have triggered those initial landslides? Could it have fractured the rock in ways that made the canyon more susceptible to erosion? Maybe. Or maybe we're just looking for drama where there's only patience. But standing at the canyon's edge, staring down into that impossible chasm, it's hard not to wonder. What if the Earth's scars aren't always carved from within? What if some of them fall from the sky? The universe is violent. Meteors, asteroids, comets, they've been bombarding Earth since the planet formed. Most burn up in the atmosphere. Some explode in mid-air. A few make it to the surface, leaving craters that last for millions of years. Earth has been hit before. Badly. The Chicxulub impact 66 million years ago wiped out the dinosaurs. The Vredefort impact 2 billion years ago created a crater 190 miles wide. The Sudbury impact 1.8 billion years ago reshaped an entire region of Canada. Why not the Grand Canyon? The meteor landslide hypothesis may never be proven, but it serves as a reminder that the Grand Canyon's story isn't finished. There are still questions we haven't answered, still forces we don't fully understand, and sometimes the most fascinating mysteries are the ones that make us question everything we thought we knew, because the canyon is old, but the sky is older, and the violence between them is written in stone. If only we knew how to read it. The early Holocene groundwater change, the rivers beneath the river. We see the Colorado River, We watch it cut through stone, relentless and visible, carving the Grand Canyon one grain of sediment at a time. But beneath the surface, there's another river, a hidden one. And around 10,000 years ago, something made it change direction. This is the mystery of the early Holocene groundwater change, a geological event that reshaped the canyon's underground landscape in ways we're only beginning to understand. The Holocene epoch began roughly 11,700 years ago, marking the end of the last ice age and the beginning of the modern climate era. As glaciers melted and temperatures warmed, the world transformed. Sea levels rose, forests spread, animals migrated into new territories, and deep beneath the Grand Canyon, water began to move differently. Scientists discovered this by studying mineral deposits in caves, isotope ratios in ancient water sources, and the chemical composition of rock layers. What they found was startling. The canyon's groundwater systems, the aquifers, springs, and subsurface rivers that feed the region, shifted dramatically during this period. Water that had flowed in one direction for millennia suddenly changed course. Springs that had been active for thousands of years went dry. New ones appeared in places where there had been none. The chemistry of the water itself transformed, suggesting that entirely different sources were feeding the system. But why? The most likely explanation is climate. As the Ice Age ended, melting glaciers released massive amounts of water into the environment. This wasn't a gentle thaw. It was a flood of biblical proportions, reshaping rivers, lakes, and underground water tables across the continent. The ice sheets covering much of North America were miles thick. When they melted, they released trillions of gallons of water, enough to raise global sea levels by hundreds of feet, enough to create entirely new river systems, enough to flood valleys and plains that had been dry for millennia. In the Grand Canyon region, this influx of meltwater may have overwhelmed existing aquifers, forcing water to find new pathways through the rock. Subsurface pressure built up, fractures widened, and the entire hydrological network reorganized itself. Imagine water trapped underground, flowing through cracks and pores in the rock, slowly making its way toward the surface. Now imagine a sudden influx of water from above, meltwater pouring down from the north, seeping into the ground, filling every available space. The pressure increases. The water has nowhere to go, so it finds new cracks, new fractures, new pathways through the stone. It dissolves limestone, creating caves. It erodes sandstone, widening channels. It reorganizes the entire underground network in a matter of centuries, the blink of an eye in geological time. But climate alone doesn't explain everything. Some researchers believe tectonic activity also played a role. The Colorado Plateau is geologically active, slowly rising and shifting even today. Subtle movements in the Earth's crust could have opened new fractures or closed old ones, redirecting groundwater in the process. The plateau rises at a rate of about 0.3 millimeters per year, barely measurable in a human lifetime, but significant over thousands of years. As the land rises, the rock bends and cracks. Faults shift, fractures widen, and water, always seeking the path of least resistance, finds new routes through the stone. There's also evidence of subsurface dissolution, where acidic groundwater slowly eats away at limestone and other soluble rocks, creating underground voids and channels. Over thousands of years, these voids can grow large enough to form caves, and when caves collapse, they can reroute entire underground rivers. What makes this mystery particularly fascinating is that it's invisible. The Colorado River gets all the attention, but the real action is happening where we can't see it, deep beneath the canyon floor, in a network of caves, aquifers, and underground rivers that we're only now beginning to map. And it's still changing. Springs that flow today might dry up tomorrow. Caves that are stable now could collapse in a century. The groundwater system beneath the Grand Canyon is alive, shifting, responding to forces both ancient and modern. Mineral deposits left behind by this early Holocene shift tell us that the water chemistry changed. Different elements, different pH levels, different temperatures. That suggests the water was coming from different sources or traveling through different rock layers, but we don't know exactly where it came from or where it went. Cave formations called speleothems, stalactites, stalagmites, flowstones, act as chemical recorders. As water drips through a cave, it deposits tiny layers of minerals. Each layer contains isotopes, variations of elements that can tell us about temperature, rainfall, and water sources at the time the layer formed. By analyzing these layers, scientists can reconstruct a timeline of groundwater change. And what they've found is remarkable. Around 10,000 years ago, the isotope signatures shift dramatically. The water stopped coming from one source and started coming from another. The temperature changed, the mineral content changed, everything changed. But where did the old water go and where did the new water come from? Some researchers believe the melting glaciers redirected ancient rivers that once fed the canyon's aquifers. As the ice retreated, rivers changed course, flowing into different drainage basins, cutting off water supplies that had been stable for tens of thousands of years. Others point to changes in precipitation patterns. As the climate warmed, storm tracks shifted. Areas that once received regular rainfall became drier. Areas that were once arid became wetter. The entire hydrological cycle reorganized itself, and the groundwater responded. There's also evidence that underground reservoirs, massive bodies of water trapped in porous rock deep below the surface, may have drained or refilled during this period. These reservoirs can hold water for thousands of years, slowly releasing it through springs and seeps. But when conditions change, when pressure builds or faults shift, they can drain catastrophically, leaving the surface landscape dry and altered. What we do know is that the Grand Canyon's story isn't just written on its walls, it's written beneath them, in the dark, in the wet, in the slow movement of water through stone. The springs that feed the canyon today, Vasi's Paradise, Havasu Creek, Roaring Springs, are all fed by groundwater. Rain falls on the plateau, seeps into the ground, and travels through the rock for decades or even centuries before emerging at the canyon's edge. That water is ancient, filtered through stone, carrying minerals dissolved from layers the Colorado River will never touch. But 10,000 years ago, different springs flowed, different water emerged. The canyon's underground rivers followed different paths, feeding different ecosystems, supporting different forms of life. And we're only now beginning to understand how profound those changes were. Cave explorers and hydrologists have mapped some of the canyon's subsurface network, but vast sections remain unexplored. The rock is unstable, the passages are narrow, the water still flows, making exploration dangerous and difficult. Some caves flood during the monsoon season, filling completely with water before draining weeks later. Others are permanently submerged, accessible only to specialized cave divers willing to risk their lives in tight, dark passages where a single mistake means death. What lies in those unmapped sections? What stories do those walls hold? What evidence of past climates, past water sources, and past ecosystems might be preserved in the mineral deposits we haven't yet studied? The early Holocene groundwater change is a reminder that the canyon isn't static. It's not a museum piece, frozen in time. It's alive, dynamic, constantly responding to forces we can barely measure. And it's still changing. Climate change is affecting the Colorado River, reducing snowpack in the Rockies, and altering precipitation patterns across the Southwest. As surface water becomes scarcer, communities are increasingly relying on groundwater, drilling deeper wells, extracting more water, depleting aquifers that took thousands of years to fill. What will the canyon's groundwater look like in another 10,000 years? Will the springs still flow? Will new ones appear? Or will the underground rivers dry up, leaving the canyon parched and silent? Because beneath all the rock and silence, there's a rhythm that never stops. It beats like the first breath of the world. And maybe, just maybe, it's trying to tell us something. That water is more than a resource, it's a memory, a record of climate, of time, of the Earth's slow dance with the sky. The Grand Canyon doesn't just show us time, it hides it. In caves and cracks and underground rivers that flow where no light reaches, where no human eye can see. And sometimes the deepest mysteries are the ones that flow in darkness. Which underground story grabbed you the most? The lost people, the sealed caves, or the hidden rivers? Tell us in one sentence below. If you found this mix of history and mystery valuable, press subscribe so you won't miss our next excavation of evidence and enigma. 6 mysteries. 6 layers of stone, time, and silence. From the newlyweds who vanished on the Colorado River to the billion years the Earth forgot. From the ancient civilization that walked away to the groundwater that changed direction beneath our feet. From the caves we've sealed to the impact we can't prove. The Grand Canyon doesn't just hold history, it guards it. We've built overlooks and trails. We've named its features and mapped its walls. We've turned it into a monument, a postcard, a place where tourists snap photos and move on. But beneath all of that, the canyon remains what it's always been, a wound in the earth that refuses to heal. These mysteries matter not because they have answers, but because they don't. Because they force us to sit with uncertainty, to accept that some questions lead only to more questions. The Grand Canyon doesn't owe us answers. It owes us nothing. But if you stand at its edge long enough, if you listen past the wind and the voices and the hum of distant helicopters, you might hear something. Not a solution, not closure, just the quiet acknowledgement that the earth has secrets older than words. And maybe that's enough. The canyon was here long before us. It will be here long after we're gone. It has witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, the birth and death of mountain ranges, and the slow crawl of continents across the globe. And through it all, it has kept its secrets, not out of malice, but out of indifference, because the canyon doesn't care if we understand it. It simply is. Which of these 6 mysteries would you want researchers to solve first, and why? Leave your pick in the comments and tell us the one question you'd ask the canyon if it could answer. If you enjoyed the journey, click subscribe and ring the bell. Join us for the next descent into the world's greatest mysteries. Thank you for descending with me into these 6 mysteries. If one of these stories stayed with you, if it made you see the Grand Canyon differently, then it did what it was meant to do. Share your thoughts on what lies beneath the canyon and what should stay buried, because some truths are dangerous. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. But remember this, some monuments weren't built to honor the past. They were built to hold it down. And the Grand Canyon, it's still holding.